All right, promise of obedience. It's a lesson taken from Exodus chapter 19, verses 1 through 6. And 24, 3 to 8. Okay. They like to just jump in the middle of something, and I like to give a little bit of background. Exodus chapter 19 takes place. Of course, last week we talked about the Passover, and the children of Israel left in a hurry, and they didn't leave any of the Passover lamb, and they did all, and they had the staff ready to go, and they left, and they left Egypt, and since then they had backed themselves up to the Red Sea, and God opened up the Red Sea and allowed them to go through it as the Egyptian army was charging after them with chariots and stuff, as Pharaoh and his army came after Moses and the people, and God opened up the waters, and they walked through, and then as they finished going through, well, if they can do it, we can do it. So they followed right in after them with the chariots and everything, and God closed the waters down on them and drowned them. And there's been all these stories about, well, the children of Israel crossed over in a very narrow spot where, it wasn't very deep. What a miracle that was to have that little bit of water in that little creek, and then to destroy the whole Egyptian army. Which miracle do you really want? God delivered them. I believe it was this. I believe it was like the Moses picture. Charleston Heston, and standing out before the waters opened up, and I picture that, and I'm okay with that. And anyhow, they proceeded on, and after all this deliverance, they saw the 10 plagues, and they saw how God defeated all these gods of the Egyptians, how God destroyed the Egyptian army by opening up the Red Sea, and they crossed on dry land. What a miracle that was! And then they had, they started complaining about the food, and they complained about the food ran out. They brought some food with them, but it ran out quickly. You got 2 million people. How do you feed 2 million people? It's quite an undertaking, but God's able to do that. And they complained about the water, and then there was the attack from the Amalekites. That's where they had Moses hold up his arms, and Joshua Joshua was fighting, and Aaron and Hur were holding up. As long as they were winning the battle every time, as long as Moses had his arms up. But when they dropped, the battle went the other way, So this is all what's happened before this. We see God delivering and working in these lives. And here we come to Exodus chapter 19 and verse 1. They have finally reached this mountain, and in the Sinai Peninsula, and who'd like to read verses 1 through 6? Well, let's start with 1 and 2, I guess. Let's start with 1 and 2. Who'd like to read 1 and 2?
In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land
Okay. Now, our Sunday school lesson has a habit of asking questions that will not be found in the verses that they give us. And so, how old was Moses when he began his work of delivering Israel from bondage in Egypt? And now, we all know that Moses began his ministry at 80, but where does this say that? You have to go all the way back to Exodus chapter 7, verse 7. Exodus chapter 7, verse 7, it says, "And Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83 years old, when they spoke to Pharaoh." So when they all started, and how long ago was this since they got to Mount Sinai? Well, it is in the 3rd month. Remember, they started over. The Passover was, okay, this is going to be your 1st month. So now we're 3 months in, and in the 3rd month, they came to Mount Sinai. So he's still 80 years old, I'm saying. I said all that just to mean that he is still 80 years old. He's not 81, 82. No, he's 80. He's still 80 years old. And Aaron is 83. Let's see. So, and then there's another question. Why was Sinai desert familiar territory to Moses? And we don't read that in our texts. Again, you have to go back. And you have to go back to Exodus chapter 2 and chapter 3. It talks about how that when Moses, when he was seeing the evil things that are happening, he killed the man. And let's see. Okay, and when in chapter 2, verse 13, it says, "And when he went out the 2nd day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting, and he..." No, wait, no. I'm sorry, go back further. Verse 11 says, "Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the 2nd day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to one of the wrong, 'Why are you striking your companion?' And he said, 'Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?' And so Moses feared and said, 'Surely this thing is known.' When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and he dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well." And it talks about him finding his wife and his father-in-law Jethro and living with them, and he became a shepherd. You see that in verse chapter 3, and then we find the incident of the burning bush, and this happened to be around the place of the Sinai. Now Midian is on a little bit further east of Sinai. But Sinai was in between Egypt and Midian, and Moses did a lot of shepherding in that area. So the question is, Why was the Sinai desert familiar territory to Moses? Well, that's where he kept the sheep. He wandered around in that, and he got to know where all the places were to go feed the sheep and to take care of them. That's why. Because he went there to flee from the Pharaoh, because he had killed a man and it was got to be known. And another story, or your sins will find you out, I guess. You can't keep something secret like that. Okay. And the third question here says, where was Mount Sinai located on the peninsula? And again, it doesn't really tell you. It tells you Sinai, and you got to know where. So, but we have a map in the back of our book, some of us do. And if you look, you got Egypt over here, and you got Midian over here, and right here in the middle is V, Sinai Peninsula, and up here is Israel today. So it's just south of Israel today, almost towards the Red Sea. There's a mountains area, and that's where our story takes place. It's south, they're just at the bottom side of Israel, ready to go into the promised land, but they stopped and camped at Sinai to get in their instructions. All right, that brings us to verse 3, and who'd like to read verses 3 to 6? Thank you.
And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel.
Okay. Moses goes up and he receives instructions from God, and let's see. Question 4. To what did God compare himself in caring for the young Israel? How did he describe his care for the young Israel?
What he'd done before.
Yeah, but what picture did he use?
Eagle.
The eagle, bearing up the young. What it says in verse 4 here says, how I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. I guess they would kick, I guess the birds would kick the young ones out of the nest, and finally they would fall, and they would, but the mama would be right there to catch them, I guess. That's the way I understand it. And bear them up. They didn't do it on their own, but they had to step forward. They had to. God provided the safe passage through the Red Sea, but they had to take that step, let's see. But he bore them up as eagle's wings, and he brought them unto himself. He brought them to. He protected them, and he brought them, and he fed them, and he did all the things they needed to have done, and brought them to brought him to himself at Mount Sinai. It's interesting there. I believe in Revelations we have the same picture described about God delivering the Israelites on eagle's wings there in Revelations. So it's just an interesting picture. Again, God is taking care. I mean, he looks after them as an eagle and bears them up. And it's not there by their power; it's by God's power that He protects them. Back in the old days, and in the new day, in the days that follow here, He's going to do the same. He's going to protect His people. It's interesting that for quite a while, Israel was, out of the picture, and through a lot of church history, it's 2,000 years, matter of fact, Israel was not even, they weren't a nation. They weren't a people. They weren't back in their land. And okay, what do we do with all these scriptures? Well, we had to invent a way that, well, people would say, well, the church is taking place of the Israel. God brings them back, didn't He? In 1948, God brings them back, puts them back in the land. When and ever in history has that ever happened? God's work is not done, and He continues to work. And just as He protected them then, and we see His faithfulness, that means that He is going to be faithful in the future. Yes.
In 1 Peter 2, the first few verses in there up to verse 9 actually talks about how even we as Christians, those who come to Christ afterward, after Jesus came, are a holy priesthood as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we're being built up as priests to serve Him.
Right.
So it's that same, and in fact, it makes the reference to the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So, and then one more thing, there's a song, it's Psalm 4, verse 8. It's a song of David, and the last verse and verse 8, it says, "In peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me to dwell in safety." So that goes to your eagle.
Right.
We don't make ourselves safe. It's whatever God's will. We can't.
Yeah.
It's up to Him. He's the one that keeps us safe or allows something to come upon us.
And we need to remember that whenever it gets tough. It's not us that does it. It's God. When tough times come, that's why we need to turn to God. He is our help. He is our stay. He is the one that bears us up. And that's a lesson that He tries to teach. And he taught it in real ways. And tries to have them, they even have a festival, Passover, of His delivering them, is a picture. We don't have a festival of frogs. We don't have a festival of flies or darkness or blood. We don't have those festivals. But it's interesting that He does have the one. Those plagues were for specific reasons, as the Passover has a specific reason. The Passover is our Christ dying on the cross for us. It was a picture of our salvation with Christ dying on it. The Passover Lamb was a picture. It was to show what needed to do. It got and how incomplete a lamb was as compared to what the Lamb of God was. The Lamb of God was able to cover all sins, and he did the sacrifice, and he sat down at the right hand of God. Complete work is done. No longer did it say, okay, back then, every year. Okay, so the picture is of God delivering us as an eagle's wings, and how does he refer to? And the next question here, question 5, what synonym might be used for peculiar when referring to God's people? And I read that it calls it a peculiar treasure, but what might be another name, or another way of describing that? Special is a special treasure. And he shall be a special treasure. I try not to at all favor one child over another, and I have 3 girls, and and a couple of them claim my favorite, and just kid, but just kidding one another that they're the favorite. Well, I grew up and I know I was the favorite, but that's beside the point. I grew up with 5 brothers and sisters. I was the baby. I was the favorite. I really was. I know it. Everybody knew it, and I know it wasn't. It tried not to be planned that way, but it seemed to be displayed that way. And I don't know if my brothers resented that or not, but they seemed to be good with it. But because we all enjoy meeting each other. We don't talk to each other, but we do enjoy being with each other. It's just a kind of, I go and visit, I spoke about 20 words to my brother, maybe. Just the way my family is, but we're quiet. Well, they sit quietly in the room and enjoy the time and listen, and maybe to other people talk, but they just like being there. I mean, it's a peculiar.
People can't enjoy that this day and age. They think something's got to be going on all the time.
Right.
Quiet and peace is nice. It's comforting.
And anyhow, but they were to be a peculiar or a special people. God has something special in mind for these people, and he tells them that in verse 6. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, as you mentioned, a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. I want you to let them know that they are going to be a special. I want them to be self-centered. A priest doesn't. What does a priest? How does a priest function? Does he function for himself? No. Job served as a priest of his family. And what did he do? He sacrificed for his kids an offering, whether they did anything or not that he knew about. But just in case they did, I am going to present this for them. And he was a priest for them. And these priests, this family, the Levites, they were to be a particular family that was to present the offerings and sacrifices for the people. But these people were to function. The whole nation was to function not thinking about themselves, but thinking about others. That's interesting. And what you mentioned, bring that about our responsibility of being a priest. It's not inward that we are to be priests, just so that I can be holy and I can be acceptable, but it's for those around me can be presented to God. And so we have a responsibility, and they were to have a responsibility. And ye shall be this is your job, this is what I want you to be doing. Go right ahead.
Well, they were supposed to be sanctified too,
Mhm.
set apart, so that they, if I understand correctly, so that they would be a light and an example of who God is to the pagan nations. And obviously they, fell short. So when I think of the priest aspect of it, I think of it as Israel was supposed to be a holy nation, a nation of priests, serving a king, God, just like we are. But as, like you said, yes, it's serving each other, but it's also making, like shining that light to those who don't believe. And that's why you're set apart, so people look at you and go, oh, maybe they would look at them and go, oh, that is peculiar. Instead of special, to them, they would go, whoa, that's peculiar.
Yeah, I kind of think of the priest as being a person who can help others come closer to God. So back in the Old Testament, the priests were doing the offerings, and reading through Leviticus once, it really stood out to me that all of these offerings are for unintentional sin. Well, we live our lives, and sometimes we do the wrong thing because we decided that's what we wanted to do. Well, is that unintentional? No, it's intentional. But there comes a point in time where you now regret doing that. And how do you approach God? Well, back then it was through the offerings where you would confess your sin and ask God, please remove the penalty for what I've done and let that fall on the blood of the sacrificed animals. That's kind of how I see it.
Okay.
So the priest was really playing a role there, kind of an intermediary of sorts, to just help people be able to come to God, ask for forgiveness, and come closer to Him.
Yeah. Now keep that in mind, what a priest was supposed to be. And then you jump forward a thousand years or so, and more so, when you come to Jesus, and he talks about the Samaritan, Good Samaritan. Who were the examples? The priest. And okay, are they doing their job? And it was interesting. The one person that was doing their job wasn't a priest, but he was a Samaritan. And I'm just saying, I'm not saying, it's just a thought that came into my mind about reading about the priests and stuff and what we're supposed to be doing. It was the Samaritan that actually did do looked outside himself, looked at others, and saw a need and performed and helped out. And the priest was so involved with keeping pure and didn't want to get involved or mess up his opportunity to serve. He might have had the one chance to serve it in the temple, and this would ruin it. If I'm hurt, messing with the guy, I don't want to be unclean, so I don't want to walk on the other side of the road. Thank you. This is my one big moment to serve God.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up though too, and I imagine back in that time, that was such a, not only
Yeah.
You know, and his, response was, is it, you probably know better than I would, but, is it unlawful to heal somebody?
Yeah.
But if your ox falls in a hole, you go and dig it out or whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not verbatim, so tell me.
Yeah, right.
But, I mean, it's just that idea that until Jesus came along and started teaching those things, that they maybe truly did not understand the concept of the difference,
Yeah.
you know?
Good, Dave.
Yeah, one of the things I like about that story is that the Samaritans, as I understand it, were looked down upon as an inferior people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's an interesting contrast that Jesus would show these supposed superior people actually being inferior in their behavior as compared to the Samaritan.
Right. Right, exactly. And we're not getting halfway through the lesson, but let me just quickly, the question was, what kind of government is it? God is designing a government that is ruled by himself. That he is a king. He is going to be what they call a theocratic, God controlled government, a monarchy. He alone has the authority. And he says, you guys are the priests. You are to represent me to the people. You are to bring me to the people. And I want you to be that holy nation that's separated, and I want you to follow the commandments. And will you do that? And the next part of the lesson, 23 to 24, verses 3 through 8, and Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has said, we will do. Okay. How many times do we say that? How many times do we say, how many times do we sing stuff that we have no intention of doing? And I try to be careful about, Lord, this is my hope. This is not what I do, but this is my hope to do. Anyhow, and Moses wrote all the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning, and he built altars unto the hill, 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrifice and peace offerings and oxen unto the Lord. And Moses took half the blood and put it in a basin, and half the blood and he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant, and he read it in the audience of the people, and he said, all that the Lord has said we do, and be obedient. And they said, the people said, all that you have said, we will do, and be obedient. And this is the 10 Commandments and stuff. We're going to be obedient. And how many can keep the 10 Commandments? Wow. Okay. But they sealed it. Then he took the blood and he sprinkled the people. It was a blood a sacrifice, one that was burnt, one was peace offering, and it was sealed with blood, just like our covenant is sealed with the blood of Christ. And he was able to fulfill it, whereas we fail. He fulfills God's command, and therefore we can have eternal life. I'm thankful for that. We're out of time. I'm sorry. But if we can have the Sunday school minutes.